So welcome everybody. It's Wednesday, September 14, 2022. This is your weekly Going Viral show. I'm Alex Stavropoulos, coming to you from New York City. We have Karen Aaron out in California and a new member, Patrick Smith, who I'm not sure where he is, but hopefully, and we may get Frank Radford later on, and possibly Dennis Goldstein, some of our regulars. All right, and so let us start with a bit of pomp and circumstance, and play just a little bit of King Charles's address to both houses of Parliament, first time as king. Again, I'll give you a good sense of all the pageantry that they're going for.
My lords and members of the House of Commons, I am deeply grateful for the addresses of condolence by the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which so touchingly encompass what our late sovereign, my beloved mother, the Queen, meant to us all. As Shakespeare says of the earlier Queen Elizabeth, she was a pattern to all princes living. As I stand before you today, I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us and which reminds us of the vital parliamentary traditions to which members of both houses dedicate yourselves with such personal commitment for the betterment of us all. Parliament is the living and breathing instrument of our democracy. That your traditions are ancient, we see in the construction of this great hall, and the reminders of medieval predecessors of the office to which I have been called, and the tangible connections to my darling late mother we see all around us, from the fountain in New Palace Yard, which commemorates the late Queen's Silver Jubilee, to the sundial in Old Palace Yard for the Golden Jubilee, the magnificent stained glass window before me for the Diamond Jubilee, and so poignantly and yet to be formally unveiled, your most generous gift to Her late Majesty to mark the unprecedented Platinum Jubilee, which we celebrated only 3 months ago, with such joyful hearts. The great bell of Big Ben, one of the most powerful symbols of our nation throughout the world, and housed within the Elizabeth Tower, also named for my mother's Diamond Jubilee, will mark the passage of the late Queen's progress from Buckingham Palace to this Parliament on Wednesday. My lords and members of the House of Commons, we gather today in remembrance of the remarkable span of the Queen's dedicated service to her nations and peoples. While very young, Her late Majesty pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. This vow she kept with unsurpassed devotion. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
The address by His Majesty the King, presented now to Speaker of the Lords and to the Speaker of the Commons. before the national anthem, played by the band of the Household Cavalry.
King's Bodyguard. King's Bodyguard. Shut up.
Band of the Household Cavalry, directed by Major Paul Collis Smith. And for many people, most people in this Westminster Great Hall, a first time to sing the national anthem to the words, "God save our gracious King."
All right, so again, the rest of it is just, yeah, I'm walking down and shaking a few hands. So I think we can skip that. Yeah, actually, let me check. I just want to. I think he's. I mean, one of the things you obviously clearly notice is that how old he is. So I just want to check. I think he's in his 70s, but let me just let's get the exact number of years. He's so he's 73. So well, I'm not sure if that makes him. Well, I'm sure they would have said, but I don't think he's the oldest person to ever ascend to the British throne, but obviously he's definitely up there. And well, wonder, among other things, how long he'll certainly not going to last as long as his mom did. So then he would be 143 when the throne passes from him, which is, well, as far as unless we crack that immortality thing, that's not going to happen. But yeah, so I guess I'll leave it open to anybody who wants to jump in. Yeah, maybe Patrick, our new commentator, Patrick, wants to, if he's out there, wants to comment on what we just saw again. Are you out there, Patrick? Or, well, I guess if not, Dennis, any thoughts? Well, obviously, you kind of caught the end of it again. We're just playing King Charles's address to the British Parliament, which was entirely about his mother's passing, and literally had nothing about the current state of Britain or any discussion of the current problems, which I think is a problem. But your general thoughts, I guess, if you wanted to chime in, Dennis, on monarchy.
I'm not exactly thrilled by the monarchy.
Okay.
I'll just put it that way. And I did write back to one of your emails, a pox upon the British Empire.
Okay. All right. So now let's go to someone who I'm sure has a different opinion, which is Frank, if you want to unmute. And I know how much of that you caught, but again, it was the King's address to Parliament, so all the pomp is certainly there. But what are your thoughts about, this changing of the guard, or however you want to put it, if you wanted to unmute and talk, yeah.
Well, I'll put it like, can you hear me? Yeah, I'll put it like this. Obviously, there's those who are nihilistic and those who see this as totally meaningless and no point whatsoever. It's history. There's a constancy in history. If you don't want to acknowledge that, or you want to see history from a different point of view, and if you really do see it as just a waste of time and pointless, I suggest you look in the mirror, and then you will be absolutely right. Okay? That's all I got to say.
Okay, Ken, you have anything to add? Or
Yeah,
again, give Patrick, of course, if you want to jump in. Yeah, we'd like to hear from you.
I concur with Frank as usual. We go through similar rituals here, a little bit more conflated with Kim Kardashian and weddings and who she's having sex with, and oh my God, she's got a new boyfriend, and then the Emmys and the Oscars, and it's. However, I don't think you could ever outlaw the pleasure that the general population in any society has in watching some nature of royalty, whether it's movie stars or billionaires or Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump.
Or the Kennedys.
The Kennedys, you know, and how they're dressed and what they're
doing.
Again,
think how many families do we have in our politics? You know, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Kennedys. Maybe the Obamas in the few. Maybe we'll see Malia run for president one day, or who knows.
And you're not mentioning the big ones that we don't get. They're so high up they don't get covered by the press. You know, like the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds.
Right. Oh no. They certainly have a big. Well, the Morgan family is.
Yeah. So there's royalty all over the world. The same manifestation goes in smaller countries where you have emperors of one nature or another. Well, Venezuela or other countries where or Fidel
if we go
Castro,
to North Korea, there's the Kim family.
Yeah,
but three grandfather, father, and son ruling the same country for the last 80 or so years. So
I'd like to bring up
probably another generation out there.
I like to bring a very irreverent point up. It's just a personal fixation I have, a fetish. Do you notice how close King Charles, how close his eyes are? What is that phenomenon?
Well, it's not crossed. It's not being cross-eyed.
No, not crossed. Just very close.
I'm sure. Well, I don't know if it's there. Well,
I know it's a question. Like facial appearances are sometimes referenced in plays and stuff.
Well, I think if you look at old photos of Philip, they have a similar physiognomy. So if you want to look where it comes from, probably
Yeah.
I know if it's too far apart, it's a sign of syphilis in the family at some point.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, we have
completely irrelevant and irreverent.
Right. But we do have a phone caller in, so if I know who that would be.
There is one thing to discuss on this thing with the succession to the throne, which is it's opened the door for a lot of deserved or undeserved criticism of the Commonwealth, of the colonies that Britain has maintained over the years.
Sure.
And the thing is, if you want to do that, you got to compare it to other regimes. Let's be a little bit.
No, there is. I mean,
Genghis Khan. You got to look at history.
Look, I've been,
the Japanese in China. The U.S. and the Philippines. You got to look at it around the world historically.
When I've lectured on Napoleon, since that's my area of study, people point out, rightfully point out, the crimes that his troops committed in Haiti, for example, and restoring slavery. So, France can certainly, and many other former colonial powers can be, raked over the coals as well. So it's not just Britain. The U.S. still can be as well, both for the past and for what they're doing now. But
can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, Mike.
Yes. Are we on the air?
Yes, we are, Mike.
Oh, okay. And the discussion is about.
We played the clip of Charles addressing Parliament, and we're just talking about the pomp and circumstances and all, the pageantry, etc.
Yeah. I think that was his succession.
Yeah, that was, yeah, that's when he basically acknowledging that he's now king. He was automatically king as soon as his mother died. So that was just confirming that. All of the pomp and circumstance has a purpose, which is to make sure that the transition is well defined. So that's basically it, and that the traditions are carried on, and that's important too. So,
important.
So what are you discussing?
Oh no, well, Ken was mentioning, brought up obviously how there's a lot of discussion of the British colonial legacy, and obviously, well, I'll just say, that there have been some Democracy Now! Have actually been doing some interesting stuff. They had one guy yesterday, for example, two guys talking about, well, the likelihood now that I think Jamaica and Barbados are going to, leave, remove the king, well, now king, and become republics because of but not just that, but calling for reparations from Britain for the, legacy of slavery and colonialism, etc.
Right. That really is, as we know, colonialism has very little to do with the crown, with the monarchy. It has to do with the governments that in other words, the governments that conduct colonial forays and get colonies. The Commonwealth is the problem. It's not the problem. The problem is that if they diminish the Commonwealth is a Commonwealth of nations. They're all under the crown, but the crown is primarily, as we know, ceremonial now.
I don't think they would necessarily leave the Commonwealth, Mike. I mean, they would become republics, but just like India, say,
Right. That's the problem. Is it would be the breaking up of the Commonwealth, because as we know, yes, if you're in the Commonwealth, you still have the crown, which is the head of state, but not the head of government. But the governments are entirely separate, so they're entirely separate nations. But they're part of this Commonwealth, the common thread being the crown. And as we know, as you probably saw from all the coverage, I mean, I've been glued to the BBC actually, but as you see from the coverage of the crown was kind of transformed to a large extent from George VI and through Elizabeth into being service to the people. In other words, just be a head of state, but that their job was to serve the people who are quote unquote subjects. Perhaps subjects is now the wrong word to use, but the fact is that there are obviously a lot of perks, but there aren't many disadvantages to being under the crown. I mean, there's nothing, just take a trip up to Canada and you'll see that the crown is, when the power of the crown was diminished primarily by George VI and Queen Elizabeth, they can't really interfere in the conduct of those countries, which some people see as a negative thing because, well, why didn't Queen Elizabeth issue an apology? Well, because an apology is a political statement. Right. She would issue regret.
Not her choice, yeah.
It's not her choice, yeah. So the fact is that I'm leery about breaking up. I mean, she really kept the Commonwealth together. It was really her. She had what it took to, because she was not, repressive, suppressive. She was kind of an inviting type of person. She didn't condescend. She had a talent for not being condescending to anyone. And part of the thing is also she was female, so it was kind of a softer type of situation than, men just come across or seen to be more hard-nosed or whatever, or harder. I think, yeah, she was able to keep this Commonwealth together. And the Commonwealth is actually very, very important in the world. I mean, if you think about it, I was talking about most of this with Frank before, but the Commonwealth is in itself when they all come together, which they don't often do, but when they come together in something like the Second World War or something like that, they're a powerful force. They may be the most powerful force in the world today, even though you've only got, in other words, the only other countries that could be considered powers besides the UK are Canada, Australia, and maybe New Zealand. But all these other smaller countries, are well placed. They're, all over the world, and they can represent a positive force, not an oppressive force. The British past as colonizers is one thing, but Britain has no real colonies. I mean, today they have.
Well,
I would always say
they do, Mike. I mean, Diego Garcia is.
I mean,
they
have few
cases like that.
colonies. Yeah, they have few colonies today, and those colonies, and they'll probably get rid of those also. I would always say that we should be. It's the British Empire, the British Empire that counts. That's a good thing. Is the empire of ideas and values, which are not imposed, but rather, offered. And that's, you could say the United States is part of that empire. I mean, just, the same way that in its day, ancient Greece was kind of an empire of ideas.
I don't think we would, given the anti-colonial American tradition, certainly if you go back to the Second World War, we rejected any, I mean, the special that came later, and all that.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the empire as it's usually defined, which is the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. They have colonies all over the place. I'm talking about ideas and values. And I think that's what Elizabeth represented, if not pushed for, which is that, kind of these shared ideas and values, or those people who wanted to share those ideas and values.
Right.
Again, empire is a loaded word now, so you can't really use it.
One point of information before I forget, which is that it's actually incorrect to state that the British monarchy has no direct connection to colonialism, because as I was reminded recently, actually, King Charles I invested in and helped to found the Royal African Company, which started the slave trade. So it's actually incorrect, And I think Charles II, and other subsequent monarchs invested in the various colonial companies directly. So
let me correct it and say this British monarchy started with George VI.
This monarch and the Queen.
Yeah. George VI, Queen Elizabeth, and hopefully
certainly a good
Prince
part
Charles,
of her,
King Charles.
The long-term, wealth of the British monarchy is, and ultimately, based in part on the colonial legacy, and so
yes,
which again is why I think some reparations in the future is necessary. But let's move on to another.
That would have to come from the government, by the way.
Yeah. Of course, they, King Charles basically reports to them, not the other way around. But yeah, let me. I'm going to move on to another interesting story, and then we can.
Wait a second. It's like, first of all, if they go republic, that doesn't mean they automatically get reparations. So you're conflating things there. So I think if you're going back to Charles I, the number of slaves we're talking about pales to insignificance compared to the Spanish Empire and out of the Ottoman Empire. and what's going on in Africa. I mean, it's just infinitesimally small.
No, it's in the millions. In fact, it's over
It's
5
not in
million,
the.
I think, total.
Whoa,
No,
whoa,
it
whoa,
is.
whoa.
It is.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
People, this
Whoa.
is Frank. These are
You
numbers
said-
from historians. These are not.
Whoa,
These are
whoa,
not
whoa,
in
whoa,
dispute.
whoa.
And
one at a time, please.
you're forgetting, Frank, also
Whoa.
that very
I'm muting everybody so we could be a little bit more civil here. I didn't quite.
Thank you.
Let Frank make his point, and then George can respond.
Listen,
Go ahead, Frank.
at that time, the number of slaves being sold or sent to the Caribbean was really small. It really was. I mean, it didn't. There was the Asiento, but that's 100 years later, practically. Well, yeah, it would be at the end of the War of Spanish Succession. That was the reason why there was an end to that war, is because the Tories sided with, basically wanted to get out of the war so they could get the Asiento to sell slaves to the Spanish viceroyalties. It was Spain was doing a vast amount of slavery into South America. Now, yes, you're right that there was, over time, an increase in slavery. You started out with Charles I. Well, that started it, but it certainly wasn't in the millions at that point at all. Essentially, I would say that it really kicked off in the middle of the 18th century with the Caribbean. You're right there, but to say that it was Britain primarily, no, not at all. I mean, it was a phenomenon that was worldwide. Slavery was an economic boon to various empires, and it was reprehensible, absolutely, always reprehensible. But this idea that Britain was the one that was the main initiator of it, no. And then, of course, what happened in the United States. Well, that kicked off much later. So I don't know why you have to put it all at the feet of Britain, especially as they were one of the first ones to ban it and then actually take action to ban piracy, to slave ships. So depends on whose history you want to look at.
Okay, thanks.
Well, that's actually just I found the actual figures. So just so we know what we're talking about here. Yeah. So again, I was not saying that Britain was the primary. You can see here again. These are pretty, I think, accurate. Yeah, because again, I had heard the figure 3 to 4 million from Britain. And so here again, see again, yeah, it's about 3 million. And again, yeah, Portugal more, but again, you can see actually again, the total to again, this is Britain is British West Indies. And this year to the North America is again about 300,000. Again, obviously, Portugal, Brazil again, obviously had a huge slave society. But actually, again, you can see the numbers for Spain are just 1.6 million. So, and actually not that much more than what the French sent. Again, about 1.25. Again, the Dutch even 500,000. Small number from Denmark and so on. But let me go on to the next clip I wanted to, which is this crazy situation in Lebanon, where things have gotten so bad that Lebanese citizens are literally holding up banks to get their money. Again, several of these have happened. So it's the economy is so bad that I mean, and they're actually getting away with it because they're just withdrawing their own money. Well, you'll see what happened again recently in this one case, but
They're becoming more common. In 2 separate incidents, hours apart, armed people enter banks demanding their own money. Lebanon is in crisis. For 3 years, people haven't been able to access their savings because of informal capital controls. Sally Hafiz is among them. Armed with a handgun, she was accompanied by activists who threatened bank employees before she was given $13,000 from her account.
In this country, this is the only way to get our money back. We didn't steal this money. We worked hard to earn it.
Sally says she needs the money to pay for her sister's cancer treatment. In a similar incident last month, an armed man named Bassam al-Sheikh Hassan held hostages at a bank for nearly 10 hours before receiving part of his trapped savings. He too said he needed money to pay for his father's hospital bill. Many others like Sally and Bassam, who are facing strict limits on withdrawals of foreign currency, gathered outside the bank after the incident. We are ruled by thieves who are forcing us to use violence, protesters chanted. People are losing patience. The economic collapse is in its third year. The currency has crashed, unemployment is high, and government services are nearly non-existent.
People believe politicians and bankers are protecting themselves while they are suffering as a result of the financial crisis. Bank deposits were used to fund the state and cover deficits. Now, the state is nearly bankrupt. Total losses amount to more than $70 billion.
There is a lack of political will to agree on an economic recovery plan that would distribute losses. And as the crisis worsens, depositors warn they will have no choice but to take their money by force.
Well, you can see that's pretty crazy out there. I mean, it's, yeah, that's definitely a economy that's literally in collapse. And so, yeah, people are resorting to sticking up their, imagine if you had, you're like, oh, I want to withdraw, the $200,000 in my account, and had to, go to your bank and point a gun at them and get, $200,000 in cash. And, well, you also see, again, basically the local currency has become worthless. So everything is, the only thing of any value is actually, dollars. So that's why, she was withdrawing, you saw actual dollars from her. And that's, yes, really the only real currency they have. And, it doesn't seem like there's any really much of a future for that country. I mean, they've been, especially since the big explosion at the port with the granary, when that ship blew up with all the grain on it. And yeah, it's just been really, it doesn't seem to be any way out either. So I'll just leave it open to anybody want to comment on this. So it's really, well, true story, but, really kind of crazy. But that's the world we're in now, I guess. So if anybody wants to unmute and comment. Ken, you want to? Thought you raised your hand there.
No. That was just
right,
a sign of
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and go around.
Well, I will make one comment. I'll say this much. It says, now you know why you need a queen. No, actually, my comment is, I mean, people holding up a bank to get their own money out is, I mean, I wonder what kind of a crime that would be. You're not stealing money,
right?
You're taking your money. So my thing is that a crime?
Yeah, I don't think they're being prosecuted either, because it would be very bad. The public would, be on the side of the robber in that case. So I don't think they're trying to prosecute them at this point. So, yeah.
I wonder if that would work with Spectrum.
That would be, well, no. Unfortunately, the NYPD probably would show up if you were to do that, Mike. And,
yeah, I mean, so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, those kind of hostage situations don't usually, you can go as far back as Dog Day Afternoon. They don't generally turn out well for the gunman in the end. So, yeah. Or I mean, there was actually a good. There's a more recent one about actual case. Yeah, there was a Marine veteran who tried to hold up a bank in Atlanta, near Atlanta, and was was killed by a police sniper. So, yeah. But let's say Dennis, or does Patrick or Dennis want to unmute and chime in? Or I guess Frank, you have any thoughts on what you just saw in Lebanon? Or we can go, or
Not
we can
really.
go on to
next step, I mean, who do you think's at fault? What, are you going to blame the West?
Well, it's the West is the ones who hold the debt, and probably should, well, it's not just the West; it's the West and the corrupt oligarchy that rules Beirut. That's, and Lebanon.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's Nasrallah, it's Hamas, it's the Syrians, and it's Russia.
No, it's the pro-Western. It's a pro-Western. No, and Hamas. Yeah. Well, not Hamas so much, but Hezbollah. Certainly, yeah. They're all. It's the gamut of all political.
Yeah, I mean Hezbollah
parties. Though they've all contributed to the mess that Lebanon is. Plus, a few foreign powers.
In what way would a foreign power be interested in keeping it in?
Well, there's a World Bank and IMF has not just a small, as they do to many countries.
Why would they want to perpetuate? Why would
forcing austerity on them?
Well, there's freezing bank accounts, which is one thing. I don't think the austerity measures meant that. I mean, that's a completely, yes, it's true that citizens have a sort of covenant with their government to, to keep the place as solvent as they can. You have to make some kind of sacrifices at times, but this is, that's not what the World Bank wants. Is to literally freeze accounts. They're expecting the government to do austere things, or make austere sort of decisions. But then, to blame, I don't see how
they
you
expect them to sell off the national patrimony to Western corporations, and then they wonder why there's nothing left in the country for the Lebanese themselves. That's what the IMF repeatedly has done.
Alex, can I interject a moment?
Sure.
Give me an example.
Ken, your camera, you should move it up because you're cutting off the top of your head.
I know. That's all right. Yeah, I got too excited. I moved forward, So anyhow, can you please give me an alternative nation state that's functioning well without corporate intervention and capitalism? Name one.
It's not about capitalism. This is about good capitalism and bad capitalism.
Okay, who's got the good capitalism?
The global South is treated different from the developed countries. That's always been there.
Oh, the global South,
or what we used to call the third world. Yeah.
Okay, so is anybody stopping them? Do they have access to education? Do they have access to resources or trade or trade? What do you call it? Tourism or something? They could make pies and sell them. I mean, what is holding them down? Why? You're saying the South?
Well,
are people in the South incompetent?
Part of that, but also part of is the legacy of being Lebanon, of course, was a French colony. And under the Ottomans before that, it's not
no. Every country used to be ruled by some other external source. There's very few countries that were never occupied by a foreign nation. So don't give me that. Oh, these poor guys, poor guys. What is it? Give me an example of a capitalist country that you consider is doing well, and you're saying all the capitalist countries in the South.
India is doing quite well now, and in comparison to the West now, they're because they have, especially because they're getting cheap Russian oil, so they're actually very their goods are more competitive than Europe because again their energy costs are much lower, and so they're doing quite well. And they were a former British colony, but again they've They've done what actually how the U.S. became a great economic power. They protect their own industry. they use their own capital to invest in their own country and education. You know, I mean, they're of course, you know, not as really the. I don't know if you want to, you might argue that it's a socialist country, but China has, you know, has then done a further level. If you just look at, you know, their growth, China, you know, China's literally lifted their entire population out of poverty. More than 800 million people who were in poverty, say, in, you know, 1949 when the communists took over. So,
and how did that happen? Deng Xiaoping was able to get investment mostly through Taiwan, massive investment into, you know,
sure.
Guangdong
But
province.
they also
like,
made,
guess what?
they also put it to
all
good
right,
use.
don't talk over me. It's like, okay, I won't talk over you. Now, why did they do that? Because they had access to investment money. They couldn't have done it otherwise. So it obviously was capitalism. It is in the interest of all capitalists to make money. And if the other side of the contract is not making money, then they don't make money. So it makes no sense. I mean, common sense from a capitalist point of view is to enable the other person in the contract to be able to pay whatever was invested in him. I mean, this is common sense. And obviously, in Lebanon, it's the same situation. Unfortunately, you have a cancer there called Hezbollah and Nasrallah, or what is that? I forget his name, but and also the Syrian influence and the Russian influence, which is in the neighborhood. So, you know, what are you going to do? Yes, Lebanon was born of Phoenician trade, Tyre and Sidon. It was back in the time of the your favorite empire, the Greek Empire. I mean, it was an amazing metropolis. Yes, it was, Tyre and Sidon. And now, what happened? What happened over time? Well, you're going to blame what, France, because it had a mandate in Lebanon? Are you going to blame them? Are you serious? And then, but no. Instead, you're saying it's somehow a capitalist phenomenon that they're in the situation they're in, because they asked for, there was an austerity plan put in place. No, you have chronic corruption, and probably it stems from more than anybody else, but from Hezbollah, and plus the tribalism there.
Well, Hezbollah is not the government and has actually never been the government. So you can't just blame Hezbollah. But let's, Ken, I'm sure you had some clips out there, so let's.
Oh, I had.
Wait, Alex, I have a question. Alex, Hezbollah is part of the government.
Right. But they're not they're not the majority party. In fact, again, it's the pro-Western parties that are control, again, will have the majority in the current parliament. So you can't, you know, just blame Hezbollah. Again, you know, again, I wouldn't give Hezbollah a pass either. But there, it's, you know, just argue like Frank does that it's all their fault is just, you know, simply ignoring again the other parties. But yeah, again, Ken, I'm you got any clips there, or you know, I can go on to the thing on actually a good news, which is that there's a malaria vaccine that's just been developed by the British.
Yeah, I happened to come across an article about the UN talking about slavery, where there's 20 million people, predominantly in Somalia and Libya. And
Libya, yeah.
All it is finger pointing and shame, shame, shame on you for your ancestors. Right now, there's 20 million people, either sex slavery or some other kind of slavery.
Sure.
Pardon my phone ringing. But we shouldn't do that. Let's go to your happy news.
Okay. Oh, but all right. Okay. So again, this is, well, couldn't be better news, which again, because this could literally save millions of lives, which is again the development of a malaria vaccine. This is BBC.
Trials of a new malaria vaccine developed by Oxford University show it provides up to 80% protection for 2 years. The scientists who created the jab say it has world-changing potential and hope it could be in use from as early as next year. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh reports.
carried by mosquitoes, the malaria parasite continues to have a devastating impact in sub-Saharan Africa, where it kills around 500,000 children each year. Now, a highly effective vaccine may be within reach. Trials in Burkina Faso in West Africa involving 450 children had already shown that 3 doses of Oxford University's malaria vaccine gave around 75% protection for a year. New results show that a booster dose at 12 months extends protection for a second year at up to 80%. The vaccine was developed at the Jenner Institute at Oxford University, in the same labs where scientists created a COVID jab in the space of a few months. By contrast, the malaria vaccine has been many years in development.
It's incredibly gratifying to make this breakthrough for malaria because it's such a difficult disease to make vaccines for, and the potential achievement that this vaccine could have if it's rolled out, it could be really world-changing.
We may not need to wait long for definitive results from larger trials. Scientists plan to submit data to the World Health Organization within weeks, with a view to getting the vaccine approved. The Oxford team has partnered with the Serum Institute in India, the world's biggest vaccine manufacturer, and says at least 100 million doses could be produced next year at low cost to make it accessible to many of the world's least developed countries. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Well, earlier we spoke to the co-creator of the vaccine, Professor of Vaccinology at Oxford University, Adrian Hill.
No other malaria vaccine candidate, and there have been over 100 tested in clinical trials, has reached this very high level of efficacy. And it's very important, as Fergus just said, that we're able to manufacture this vaccine at scale. And Oxford University has again partnered with the Serum Institute of India to address that global manufacturing need for, in this case, hundreds of millions of doses. Malaria is a parasitic disease. You need to vaccinate against a parasite. And there aren't any vaccines out there that work against parasites. So technically it's been difficult for many reasons, one of the big ones being that this malaria parasite has 5,000 genes. A virus might have 10 or 20, so it's much easier to identify a good target. In malaria, people have looked at very large numbers and finally settled on this one that is looking quite good. And then you have to develop a vaccine that is easy to manufacture, so it's not going to cost $50 or $100 per dose. And all of that has taken some time.
Okay. So that obviously could be a world-changing vaccine. Again, what's interesting, as they point out, we're talking about a parasite here, so this is, quite a bit more complicated than producing a vaccine for a virus. Again, it's many fewer, thousands fewer, basically, genes to deal with. But again, the interesting, of course, implication, obviously millions more, particularly in Africa, living, and obviously the economic costs of not just so many people dying, but so many people, especially Africans, suffering, and the cost to care for them and so on. This has a big potential to really positively impact, I think, the subsequent history of Africa. And it sounds like the vaccine does work, and again, it's where it says, obviously it sounds like there would have to be a yearly thing. You have to get boosters and so on, like with the flu. So, but obviously, I think malaria kills a lot more people than the flu every year, and has, especially again in the global south. So I think this is, a very good thing. And so how about Dennis? Do you want to unmute? And there you go. No, you're still muted, Dennis. You got to hit the right. Oh, there you go. Okay, so what do you think about all this?
Well, I hope they're more successful with the malaria vaccine than they are with COVID.
Right. Well, it sounds like this is pretty. Although again, it's going to require boosters. But, you know, again, like I said, it's a parasite, not a virus. So I think it's much harder to get that kind of, you know, I'm guessing that, you know, basically means that a vaccine can't, like, you know, protect you for life. You just get over however many doses once and you're good. But yeah, so Mike, you want to unmute and add your
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's great that they have a malaria vaccine. You know, because first of all, as we know, malaria is. You talk about long COVID.
Yeah.
Malaria is a lifelong illness. So even if you do survive it, it's
Right.
something you have to be.
Yeah, like polio.
Right. And so that would be great. It would be nice if it was a vaccine, if they could develop it further, so that if it was like the polio vaccine, a vaccine that was long lasting, you know, possibly lifelong lasting. That's a great thing. Although if they brought it to the United States, people like Ron DeSantis and things like that would be saying we should take it, you know, because it's invading their bodies. The only people whose bodies they're allowed to control are women.
Right.
So
yeah, the other good
however,
thing is that it's a cheap vaccine. So obviously this is something that's going to be affordable for the rest of the world. It's not just going to, you know, it's not going to be like AIDS vaccines. It just was originally, you know, only something really rich countries can afford. So, and it sounds like it's something they can do. They can make in, you know, like from India in large batches. So you have enough to vaccinate, you know, all of Africa, say. But yeah, let's Frank. You want to unmute and join us?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, well, okay.
Well, even though this vaccine has not yet been distributed, it was able to knock monkeypox out of the news.
Really? You haven't.
I haven't heard anything about the monkeypox today.
Right. Well, I don't think this is quite made the. Again, I think this was. I was able to find it because again, it's a BBC clip, and I think so far I think they're the only ones to. You know, this is to talking about it because again, it's from University of Oxford. Obviously, they were given a heads up about it by.
Okay, so there was something we were discussing before we started the program here. So I have a video I'd like to present.
Yeah, you go to it.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky paid a surprise visit to the recaptured town of Izium on Wednesday, a key logistics hub in the northeastern Kharkiv region.
Звільняють наші землі, які віддали найдорожчі, що їм дали їх батьки, їх життя. Слава Україні!
Thousands of Russian troops fled Izium over the weekend in Russia's worst defeat since they were driven back from the outskirts of Kyiv in March. Zelensky has vowed to recapture all Ukrainian territory from Russian forces, including Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014.
The view is very shocking, but it's not shock for me because we began to see the same pictures from Bucha, from the first deoccupied territories. So the same, destroyed buildings, killed people, and so what can I say? That is the part of our real history and the part of modern today's Russian nation. Yeah, that they did it. Only them. We know that truth is on our side though, so it means that we will come. I don't know when. And nobody knows when. but we have plans. So we'll come because it's our land and it's our people. That's why we'll come. Нам головне, Україні головне продовжувати бути дуже відкритою для цього. І тоді за всі ці наслідки, впевнений, будуть вироки, буде трибунал. Я в цьому не сумніваюся жодного дня і не на секунду. Володимире, дякую за службу.
The Ukrainian president also met with servicemen in the northeastern Ukrainian town of Balaklia, which was also recaptured by Ukrainian troops.
Я бажаю кожному і кожній з вас здоров'я, вашим сім'ям. Ще раз дякую, ви абсолютно героїчні люди. Бережіть себе і народ України. Наші діти, ваші онуки ніколи не забудуть. Ну, ви, будь ласка, нікому з цих зрадників і терористів нічого не пробачайте.
Now that was like a somewhat emotional piece. I normally wouldn't advocate that, but I just wanted to bring up the subject because from what I understand, and I don't have sides on this, I just hope there's a ceasefire and a settlement and it's over with. But what I heard was they faked them out. They did a juke. The football term is juke. You know, you look like you're going right, you go left. They presented, the Ukrainian soldiers presented a motion, an incursion in one place. The Russians responded, and then they came back and hit hit the other territory, I think, in the east. So, and they seemed to be better organized militarily and support-wise than the Russians. So I don't know how much coverage this is getting, but it sounded like some people thought it was perhaps a pivotal change in the scenario where Ukraine is going to get the upper hand and be able to proceed, and Russia's running out of resources and troops. So I don't follow this like you military historians do. I just happened to catch a clip somewhere, and I just played this one to bring the topic up. But I can't comment on it technically. I think maybe Frank and Alex and Dennis could
do a long debate on this. But well, the big question is, what happens next? The war, because even a lot of Western military commentators are kind of making that point that they're saying it's not over. We have to see. Basically, can the Ukrainians replicate this elsewhere if they truly want to throw the Russians out of their territory? And at this point, it's unclear if they can. So we'll have to see. It's all up in the future. The Ukrainians have continued to attack elsewhere, and at least so far, they're not having retaken a little bit of additional territory in Kherson. But, they're certainly not threatening to, take a lot of territory anywhere. And, the interesting thing is, again, this also could mean that the Russians bring in a much larger force and essentially just, in fact, again, that's what a lot of the pro-Russians and people in Russia are, mobilize the whole country, declare a total war, and crush the Ukrainians. So it could have potentially a pretty bad, result if again it essentially mobilizes the Russians to just crush the Ukrainians, which is what a lot of Russian media is saying essentially. So again, it's something we'll have to see in the future, but I'm sure the guys will disagree with me.
I must have gotten a false report then, because the news article said that one of the towns that was recaptured by the Ukrainians was a main hub of distributions and would make it difficult for the Russian forces.
Well, some people think that, some people disagree on that. So that's a matter. Yeah, it's a matter of interpretation.
Do you really
the Russians they did establish a very good new defensive line that's based on the river Oskol. That's much easier for them to defend. So
who?
The Russians.
Oh,
they basically pull back to a river where they can.
Okay.
The other, just one thing before you finish. The other thing is, we're entering, as you know, Frank will tell you, the mud season in that part of the world where things basically really shut down. So what the Russians may be hoping that, again, the Ukrainians can't make any more progress, the mud season comes on and everything basically grinds to a halt, and then things will resume, the real fighting will resume basically in the winter. So there's that. But yeah, I'm sure Frank will disagree with me.
You're correct. You're absolutely spot on there. I will totally disagree. Well, what happened is they took Kupiansk, and that is a rail hub. The Russians tried to put in airborne elements. They even put in aviation elements to assist those, and they were still forced off the river. The fact is, well, if you don't, this is an interpretation of events which other people have said, not just me, but it's essentially a rout. There is nothing Russia can do at this point. They are making fundamental errors, the Russians, and they still persist in doing it, by trying to attack in Bakhmut and trying to hold on to and even counterattack in areas in the Kherson Oblast. What they need to do is what they did initially, is vacate wherever they are now and try and get back to defensive lines. They need to do massive withdrawals. Possibly, I would recommend for the Russians to get back to the isthmus between the Zaporozhian Oblast and the Kherson Oblast and Crimea. If they don't do that within the next 3 or 4 days, I mean, literally, they are going to lose the Crimea by the middle of October. That includes Sebastopol. And that means almost certainly, and I predicted that this would happen in August based on everybody providing precision munitions as they promised. Okay, I predicted that Putin would be out by the end of August. But, and that this advance would take place, say, 2 weeks ago. But it's happened. We have given, the Ukrainians a 21st century means of winning. Okay, but it's a limited resource, and so that it has to be shifted from one front to another. That's why these attacks are sequential. What's going to happen next is several major axes of advance towards Melitopol and Mariupol, and that will incorporate all the precision munitions that we've sent. They haven't obviously used up all their precision munitions, but we're talking about HIMARS, the Excalibur, Volcano, and these elements, plus HARM, and all the other intelligence assets that we provide, mainly through our satellites. So what's going to happen within, say, I would say 4 days, is that there's going to be another major offense. If the Russians have not moved by then, they will lose Crimea by the middle of October. They've moved as much as they can to cross the border. I'll do that.
Well, Frank, how much do we know of the Russian troops? Hey, what do we know of the Russian troops that are just been stationed in Crimea?
There's not a lot there. They've basically moved sufficient to bolster what's in the Kherson Oblast. And they're on the eastern side of the Dnieper River. Now, that element has got 2 choices. It can fall back to defend the isthmus, but it needs to do that now. And that means that Putin has to make a military decision rather than a political decision. The political decision is continue on towards Odessa. The political decision is to continue on to Bakhmut and go for Kramatorsk. This is a Cannae. In other words, you have if you're Hannibal, you allow the Romans to succeed. The more they succeed, the more they're entrapped. And this is what's happening in Bakhmut and in Kherson. So what we're going to see in the next 4 days is the next phase, which means, what they're basically doing is redeploying their precision munition assets towards the southern front, Melitopol and Mariupol. So they'll support that attack as, those elements, to include the Azov regiment, by the way. So it's going to be essentially splitting the Russian army, and their morale is such that the only elements I see it that can actually do anything around Bakhmut, and those who are doing the counterattacks in Kherson. They're good Russian elements, but they're sacrificed to an official to basically a political end. So ideally, they need to move now. If they move now and get back to that isthmus of Crimea, such that they get a series of defense lines, and this requires a lot of deliberate planning in withdrawals. If they get back there in time, then they might be able to hold that long enough for winter to come. But if they don't move within the next 3 or 4 days and admit that this is our route, then you're going to see the whole thing. You're going to see mass surrenders around Kherson. You're going to see mass surrenders around Severodonetsk and Luhansk, and you're going to see the Bakhmut group also in dire circumstances, either heading direct towards the Russian Federation, or they're going to evacuate their equipment, and then they're just going to horde running all over the place. So their generalship needs to take charge of this defeat in order for it not to be a complete rout.
They can't do that. They don't have, no, they can't do that. Putin is in charge.
That's exactly the problem.
Yeah.
That's exactly the problem. He's replaced leadership, and
A
no
few
lead.
times.
Yeah. So you've got essentially a mafia organization unable to accept what's going on. And so, no general, if he reached the rank that Putin allowed him to reach, he's going to be a sycophant. So, he can't tell him, he's like talking to Nero or Caligula, it's just not going to listen to you.
That was probably the problem with Stalin in the summer of 41. He kept wanting his generals to fight, and that's why they were massively enveloped 3 times.
Yeah, well, Stalin is not the example you want. See, their example would be preferably Suvorov, and that's sort of genius. That's what they need. But that kind of leadership is not going to be allowed by a Putin regime. So Putin's regime is going to be upended, probably, I would say, within the next 3 or 4 weeks, because of these decisions. And this next offensive is going to be as unreal as this one.
Yeah, but who's going to do it, Frank? Who's going to do it, Frank? I mean, it's not the
Ukrainians.
people. There are no big demonstrations in Russia.
No, I'm talking about the next offensive, the Ukrainian offensive. That's just about to happen. It's going to knock them for a 6. Now, you're right. Is anything in Russia able to say something? Well, they are saying it. There are bloggers and there are lower-ranking politicians who are putting out these.
They've started to do that.
They're soliciting the Duma, are saying,
very
hey, we
people.
need. Well, if it becomes more frequent, you don't have to be as brave. And you look back at 1917, and they got rid of the Tsar, just like that. And then you got Kerensky, and of course you got Lenin after that. So Russia could fall into a different status completely. Now, the threat that people have said is, he's going to be worse than Putin, and Putin may possibly go nuclear or even chemical, or blow up the Zaporozhian plant, or blow up the dam. He just blew up the Kryvyi Rog dam, okay, which was no big deal. It wasn't biblical, but he just blew it up mainly because it's Zelensky's birthplace. So he's screwed that area. But he could do these things. But the threat against Moscow and St. Petersburg would be permanent, in perpetuity. In other words, Ukraine would say, okay, you're going to have a cobalt bomb or 2 or 3 going off in Moscow or St. Petersburg. Not today, not tomorrow, but it will happen. So that's a threat. You want to make that uninhabitable, you do it to us. So these are there are implicit threats, and also there's the Article 5 threat. It's suddenly, a wind takes this radiation if he uses TAC nukes, or he blows up the dam. It's like it goes over France. That's Article 5.
Or he could just he could let that nuclear plant go, not nuclear, what's the term, meltdown, and then just retreat and leave the dirty radiation behind him.
If he does that, that's Article 5. I mean, it's legitimately in Article 5. So that's my take on it. It obviously disagrees with
Frank, please define Article 5.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's an act of war against NATO. I mean, if you've got radiation clouds caused by an enemy floating over your territory, and it was done deliberately, and it's not an accident, then that's, there's going to be calls. There's going to be calls for this is an actual act of war. And NATO has its own bureaucracy, its own set of, starter buttons, right? And it's like, oh, wait a minute, European Union may say something different, or the various countries may say something different. Not necessarily so. Bureaucracy's got its own initiators.
Right. Well, let's let Mike and Jim, since I think you heard most of that. So, what are your thoughts on Frank's opinion about what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, I'll refrain. I'm just joining this phone call, so let others talk.
Right. So I guess Mike, what's your opinion?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just have to say that, I've been watching the BBC primarily, and you have an end of an era, one of perhaps the most major event in recent history, was the Queen, and yet the BBC has been interjecting stories about what's going on in Ukraine. So the fact that it can even interfere with the coverage of Queen Elizabeth is major. Normally the BBC would just have end-to-end coverage of Queen Elizabeth, but they have had stories on Ukraine.
Right.
And substantial stories.
It's almost end-to-end, just by the number of stories. If you can look on their website.
Well, no, but the fact that there are any stories about.
No, I get what you're.
Yeah, I mean, when you have this, end of an era event, and these stories still coming through, so it is a major development. And I think we look at it from a different, from one other angle, which is that right now, it's possible, I don't say it's probable or it's likely, but it's possible there could be a window for negotiations here. Yeah. Russia has already basically, the Russian media has already basically admitted that if it's not a rout, that this is a serious setback for Russian forces. Yeah. So if the Russian government, whoever was in charge, would actually say, okay, basically lay their political cards on the table and said, look, this is what this is all about. This is what we need. The bottom line, we need access to Crimea. We need access to the ports, whatever. Because again, as Frank was saying, Russia still has, the war isn't over. Russia still has the capacity to pull back and have a good defensive line if they're smart enough to do that, or wise enough, I should say. But if the Russians, because Lavrov did mention a couple of times about negotiations, I think it may be time for Russia to put its political cards, what their political intentions are, or what their political needs are on the table, and then see what Ukraine, even though Ukraine is celebrating their victories, they're still wise enough to know that they haven't had a final victory yet, to see what could be gotten out of negotiations. Now, again, I don't know if the Russian government is ready to do that, or what Putin's thinking, or anything like that, but there might be a window there for negotiations, ironically, because of the Ukrainian success. But Russia would have to basically say, look, this is what this was all about. this is what we absolutely need. Not just what we want, but what we absolutely need. So can we come to terms on that? And that would probably mean no Russian troops, in other words, no Russian occupation of any Ukrainian territory, or at least the Ukrainian territory, the part of the Ukraine that was unoccupied prior to this war. I'm not talking about anything to do with Crimea or anything like that. So if they basically say we need this land bridge or something, but it doesn't have to be under our control, it could be Ukrainian, but we need a guaranteed access to that land bridge. I don't know. Again, this to me seems a little bit more of a long shot, but it is a possible opportunity.
Yeah, it would all boil down to how much the West is willing to spend for how much Ukrainian land to get back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm not talking about military. I'm talking about through negotiations. Yeah.
No, I understand.
Well, things aren't easy for the Ukrainians either, because I mean, if you looked at, I think Jim's mentioned again, Adam too has had a long, I think about a month ago. Yeah, it's about a month ago. Actually, at the end of August, he did a long piece that, pointed out, among other things, just how bad the Ukrainian economy is and how there's a potential of total collapse. That's a possibility. So obviously that would put a big wrench in any plans if you get that kind of outbreak. The economy shudders to a halt. And one thing there with the Russians the Russians did just display an ability to take out a good part of the Ukrainian electrical grid and shut down essentially all the railroads in the east. So actually, if they can do that again, which they may do again if they're with the next Ukrainian offensive, that's going to be a lot of trouble, because I don't think the Ukrainians their logistics are like 98% dependent on moving stuff by rail. So I find if they can just knock out the Ukrainian rail system at will, sustaining.
But if I could just interject, Alex, that would. Alex, if I can just interject briefly, that is why I think it's a window of opportunity, because it's not like the Ukrainians are facing total success,
victory now.
A guaranteed victory. So that if the Russians push for the negotiations, they may find a willing partner with Ukraine, provided, I guess that the bottom line would be, Russia would have to pull out of all Ukrainian territory. But if they got some political concessions as being able to use that land bridge or whatever, I don't know. I don't know how it would work, but I'm saying the reason there is a window for negotiations is because there is no fait accompli.
Right.
It's a major Ukrainian success, but it's not, a fait accompli for the war. So both sides might be willing to negotiate.
Well, Alex, we've sorely missed your presence.
My contrary opinion.
Yes, we sorely missed them, but I'm sort of curious to hear what Dennis and particularly Patrick Smith has to say about this before we bring on.
I think Patrick might just be listening in, because we've asked him to chime in, and so far he hasn't.
Well, I don't know who Patrick is. I don't even know how he got.
He's a friend of Ken's, actually.
Okay, is that
Ken
true?
has to come on, but yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And we do have. I don't know if Darryl can, if you want to unmute.
Has Dennis commented about this?
Yeah, well, not about this, but he's commented before. Yeah, Dennis, if you're unmuted, so if you want to comment on current events in Ukraine and all that, the offensive, etc.
I've been reading Scott Ritter. Does anybody know that name?
Yeah, of course.
Scott Ritter says the Russians are going to win. And I really don't know one way or the other. But Scott Ritter is so far credible to me. And most of what we're hearing is propaganda coming out of both sides, Ukraine and Russia. And we have to be very careful about what we're adhering to, because it might be just a pack of lies.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Dennis.
That was Scott Ritter.
Yeah.
Scott Ritter was a
Mark knows who he is, Dennis. He was being rhetorical there, yeah. But Darryl, you're there if you want to chime in as well, or maybe he's otherwise.
Actually, I'm really glad to see you're back, Alex, so that
yeah,
I can get a perspective on. And I'm really interested. Is anybody talking about the arms sales, or are they really seriously going to consider selling HIMARS to all the people who are saying, "Gee, I want to get a HIMAR"? It appears that there's a world market. Aaron shared a very interesting article, and I looked up some of the people in the article. I think there's money to be made here, and Putin's on the table.
Definitely. Because I'm sure, I know, I think, is it Raytheon who builds? Well, whoever builds them, I'm sure, is looking to cash in, yeah. But I think Jim might have a response to that since he's raised your hand. So yeah, go, Jim.
I wanted to share, yes, the HIMARS, we're going to produce 500 HIMARS. So yeah, it's like, let's go get the HIMARS. But this is one of the reasons why this is an agreement that was reached in Kyiv 2 days ago. And this is called the Kyiv Security Compact. This was reached between members of NATO and the Ukrainian government. And what I would point out is that essentially there's not going to be peace soon. I mean, unfortunately, there's not going to be peace soon because this document basically talks about the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances proved worthless. That was something that happened a long time ago. If you recall, in Budapest, that was where Putin made a particularly strong statement about the whole question of NATO expansion. That was back in 2008, 2009. And what they're arguing about here is essentially the strongest security guarantee for Ukraine lies in its capacity to defend itself against an aggressor under the UN Charter Article 51. This requires a multi-decade effort of sustained investment in Ukraine's defense industrial base, scalable weapons transfers and intelligence support from allies, training missions, and joint exercises under the European Union and NATO flags. The security guarantees will be positive. They lay out a range of commitments made by a group of guarantors together with Ukraine. The compact will bring together a core group of allied countries together with Ukraine. That would include the United States, UK, Canada, Poland, Italy, Germany, France, Australia, Turkey, and Nordic, Baltic, Central, and Eastern European countries. So in other words, and then you want to bring in, of course, Japan and South Korea. So in other words, we're seeing a codification of this new Cold War with these ideas to have, quote, this as the way to solve this peace process. And Putin would have to be overthrown to have this kind of thing as a possible serious option for him to do. And right now we know he's meeting with Xi Jinping. So who knows what's going to be the outcome. But I recommend this. I will send this out to everybody. I'll put it in the chat. It's pretty interesting. If you read it carefully, it essentially is a guarantee for no peace settlement in the short term. And again, I'm no fan of Putin's, but I'm no fan of not having peace.
All right.
Did anybody happen to hear Robert share this afternoon with Chris Hedges?
No. Well, why? What did he say?
Well, he just gave the background on from the trend. Well, they were mostly talking about Gorbachev,
right? Who Scheer personally interviewed, I think, way back. Yeah.
Yep. Well, he also wrote a book on him.
Right.
If you listen to the evolution of Putin, let's put it that way, and how he was carefully guided to this point, I want to know why, and leave the nuclear thing off the table, why the American public isn't presented or isn't, calm down, get a grip, you can do this. Why are the NATO allies allowing the Ukrainians to continue in this fashion when this could be over yesterday? It doesn't appear that Russia has a whole lot on the ball here. And it's like you're propping Russia up on the ropes so that Ukraine can get a couple of shots in, and then all of a sudden, what do you deny weapons or something so that Ukraine gets pushed back and you just continue this? until maybe she says, "Man, them Russians, man, they're not happening." There's something really funky about what's going on here, because it doesn't appear the Russian army, has the capability of even handling a weak Ukraine. How could they take on NATO? What happened?
Well, that's that we don't have several
That's
hours.
going to be that'll be a long discussion, Darryl, to get into
But
that.
that's a good point, because look, what it does show you is that, and this is sort of gets into Frank's mentality about war, is that yes, indeed, military conflict does indeed produce change, whether we like it or not. It's of course a horrible way to produce change, but it does produce change. And now we have a situation where a successful counteroffensive by the Ukrainians, due to essentially the support they got from NATO and the United States, has essentially turned temporarily the tide of battle. Whether it will have a political outcome in Russia or not remains to be ascertained. I understand there was some sort of security lockdown around Moscow today, which I'm trying to figure out. They actually, yes, indeed, it was sort of an interesting thing. I said, wow, what's going on here? And it's not beyond the realm of possibility. Some are comparing this. Again, I think they're getting a little over historical here, but some are comparing the defeat to the Battle of Mukden in 1905, which we know unraveled the Tsarist regime. So, hold on. And so whether that's going to be the case or not, I don't know. But I don't know. Alex, you must have other stories you want to talk about before we I think Frank wanted to say something.
Sure, yeah. Well, let's go to something.
Well, hold it. Well, wait, we haven't finished what's going on with you. You mentioned the dire straits of Ukraine. Sonnenfeld and others pointed out that from Yale pointed out that it costs about $44 a barrel for Russia to extract oil. Okay. And it's at the moment it's at $80, but they're doing a discount of $35 for China. So in fact, they're making barely anything on their oil that they're selling to China and India. And actually, if there's going to be a cap put about $50, they'll make nothing. Hardly they make $6 a barrel. They are hurting. And by the way, the other thing is that Europe doesn't need it. It's quite clear that this winter they don't need the energy from Russia. And in fact, the whole argument has been inflated. Oh, yeah.
That's unclear. That's not what Adam Hughes is saying, Frank.
It may not be what Adam Hughes is saying, but that's what Yale is saying. And Yale is saying that thanks to the terminals being built by Germany in record time, the conversion terminals for natural gas, they're going to be producing. In fact, there's more gas coming from the United States than ever came from Russia. This is incredible.
That's simply not true, Frank. The U.S. has had we've had problems at our gas terminals that meant we couldn't send all the gas we wanted.
Well, yeah, you're getting gas from Algeria as well. You're getting LNG. I'm talking about LNG gas. It's they've got six terminals.
That's not what the German industrialists and unions are saying. They're saying their economy may shut down.
Frank, this is a very important topic, which I know
that we should research more
on. And we have other venues. Look, we just spent literally, as you know,
we'll talk
about 12 hours in the past couple of days talking about this situation. And guess what? We didn't handle that one yet. It just shows you how complicated and intricate this issue is. Because
I'm merely saying, obviously, mine's a contrarian argument,
right?
That
no
Russia,
no
shit, Shylock, yeah. But Russia is not doing well. It is absolutely not doing well. And the powers that be over there, you showed some brilliant stuff last night, the night before, Jim. On exactly what's being said on the various pundits by the various pundits in Russia. They are not happy with the situation, and they're saying it like it is. Now, from my limited understanding of military history, I cannot see Russia doing anything else but what I've suggested, and that is to bug out. You know, they need to get a MacArthur there and just bug out as fast as you can and get back to the isthmus. And if they don't do that within the next 3 or 4 days, their goose is cooked. And that particularly Putin's and Lavrov and all the rest of them, Peskov and the rest of them.
Well, we will see. All right, thank you. Alex, maybe you should continue with another story. Here.
Yeah, so let's talk about something a little less controversial, which is I found this interesting piece from Al Jazeera. Again, their usual thing, you know, long form thing, the stream, talking about black holes. So again, well, hopefully a topic that we won't have too much controversy over, but this was rather interesting. Yeah, black holes.
What you're listening to are pressure waves from a galaxy cluster known as Perseus, about 240 million light years away from Earth. NASA's Black Hole remix recently went viral online, and it's fueling more and more interest in black hole science, as well as its mysteries. Hi, I'm Ahmed Shahabuddin. I can imagine, like me, you have a lot of questions, so jump into today's YouTube chat and you can be part of this discussion. A black hole is believed to be the most extreme environment in the universe, an area in space where the force of gravity is so intense, not even light can escape. But how much do scientists really know about black holes and what their actual purpose is? Well, joining us today in Connecticut, Priyamvada Nadarajan, a professor of astronomy and physics at Yale University and one of the principal investigators with Harvard University's Black Hole Initiative. In the U.S. state of Rhode Island, Kimberly Arcand, a data visualizer and science communicator for NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. And in New York State, Jehan Kartaltepe, an astrophysicist at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where she studies the evolution and formation of galaxies. Thank you so much for being with us beyond feeling very unaccomplished after all those introductions. No, I'm joking. So many interesting burning questions here, really, but let's start with the most fundamental. Kimberly, what is a black hole?
Well, I think a black hole is a really cool thing, and it's a really interesting thing and a thing of mystery. But in essence, I like to think of them as a dense, compact object whose gravitational pull is so strong that within a certain distance of it, nothing, not even light, can escape. And many of the black holes that we sort of know and love, I guess, are thought to be the result from the collapse of a very, very, very massive star as it sort of gets towards the end of its stellar evolution.
That's a simple explanation that I can understand. I want to ask you, though, Priya, you know, when we talk about black holes, there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of maybe confusion of what it exactly is. So they certainly seem to help us understand how our galaxy kind of was shaped and formed. But what fascinates you most about it?
Well, I guess as Kim just mentioned, right? So you can think of the black hole as a place of extreme gravity from which nothing can escape. And there is this region, sort of like a sacred boundary, if you will, called the event horizon. So once you cross the event horizon, nothing, no matter, not even light, can escape. So what happens inside the event horizon is something that we don't quite understand. We're starting to understand it and figure it out. But we know that the black hole actually encases a point that we call a singularity. This is where all our knowledge of physics breaks down. So for me, the fascination with black holes is that they represent the edge, sort of the limits of knowledge, right? And so trying to understand them, like you're literally pushing knowledge and our minds as much as we possibly can.
Well, I mean, that's certainly fascinating to me. I mean, my dad's a physicist. He spent much of his life trying to explain some of this stuff to me. I don't know that I got it, but that certainly it makes sense to me. I mean, so when you say singularity, that's the center of the black hole. This is where we don't have sort of the physics knowledge to really understand what's going on. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. So our understanding, all our laws, right? Nature has all these laws, these symmetries, and everything kind of breaks down when we approach the singularity.
Interesting, fascinating. Jehan, when we talk about sort of galaxies and how they've evolved, I know a lot of your research focuses on this. We have people in our live YouTube chat right now actually asking some pretty pointed questions I want to share with you. One of them says, do black holes lead to higher dimensions? And maybe the most interesting one to me from Solid Cancer says, can you have 2 or 3 black holes that have joined together or merged?
That's a great question. So my research focuses on galaxies themselves and how they form and evolve over time, but I'm especially interested in what happens when 2 galaxies merge together. And we think that all galaxies have these supermassive black holes in their center. So when those galaxies merge and become one, those black holes should also merge and become one. And just recently, we got evidence of this process through the gravitational wave detections by LIGO, which actually observed what happens as a result of this merger and the gravitational waves that are emitted that we can detect all the way here at Earth.
And I see that visual that we're sharing with our audience. It's like I see these things and it fascinates me, but I fear that I don't understand just how fascinating it is. But we have this headline as well I want to share with you, Jehan. It says a pair of supermassive black holes could be fated to collide within 3 years. Certainly sounds like something we should be anticipating. Is this doom and gloom? What does that mean?
It's definitely not doom and gloom. From our perspective, we won't see too much different. If we're lucky enough, we'll be able to detect gravitational waves from this merger and be able to study a little bit about the last moments before the merger actually happens, which would be really useful for physics. But otherwise, not too much changes from our point of view. It's certainly not doom and gloom.
And we've seen images. We heard that sound at the top of the show, Kimberly. I know you're working to kind of figure out, in a sense, to put it in layman's terms, if we can, make an image of the black hole and also with the sound. Could you share with us the sound, kind of what it is, what it means? We were joking before we went live. To me, it sounds like, Stranger Things. It certainly sounds a bit ominous. But how are we experiencing the data that we're collecting?
Yeah, I'm a Stranger Things fan as well. So I think I really love that analogy about the sound. And I've heard other people talk about how it sounds to them like a horror soundtrack, or it just sounds like something from Hans Zimmer. It's this idea, the sonification is pretty cool because it actually took an archival result from 2003 from Andy Fabian et al. And in that result, they had made this discovery that this massive black hole was just belching out into the surrounding environment, and those belches are sort of causing these pressure waves or these sound waves in the hot gas. And so those sound waves we could actually translate into a tone, which was B flat, about 57 octaves below middle C. So way, way below human hearing, like hundreds and hundreds of piano keys below human hearing. And I think this idea that we could then take that today and sonify it, so take that note that we know it's singing out into the universe and turn it into sound that humans can hear, was really exciting, because to me it's a way to not only learn things about them but also help communicate them to people, for example, who can't see, someone who's blind or low vision.
Yeah, and that was part of it. I mean, that's doubly fascinating. I think, we want this show to be as accessible as possible, and part of that means kind of breaking things down. We hear these terms like not even light can escape from a black hole, and we're going to dissect that further. But for now, I want to share some comments that are coming through on YouTube. We have Neptune asking, what is the nearest black hole to our solar system, and is it possible for them to collide with us in the future? Who wants to take that? Priya?
Sure. The nearest supermassive black holes, right? All three of us are interested in these sort of overweight cousins of the little black holes that the LIGO collaboration caught colliding, right? Is the one at the center of our own galaxy, and it's 4 million times the mass of the sun. And I mean, I think the rest of your question was what? The nearest one and? Might
they collide with us in the future? It's that age-old question of,
I think we are safe. We are quite safe, and I think the one at the center of our galaxy is actually sitting very quietly. It's feeding on a very tiny trickle, and it's largely dead for most purposes. But it's a fascinating one for us. That's right. You're showing the up-close image from the Event Horizon Telescope collaboration. which is as close as we will ever get to a black hole.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I mean, you know, a lot of these questions, I have to share them with you on YouTube, are kind of better than my questions, or at least they're the exact same as my questions. So here we go. Buzz videos saying, how can we learn about black holes if they trap light and can't actually be seen? Now, I see that you're nodding, Jehan. So I'm going to ask, I mean, you know, we hear this phrase, not even light can escape. What does that really mean? And yeah.
Yeah, I'm nodding because that's a question I've heard a lot, actually.
Okay.
Right? We're trying to study something that we can't see. We're trying to understand the absence of light, and that's a kind of complicated concept, right? The video you showed earlier, you saw these sort of black spheres in the middle that are representing the black hole. So, right, we can't see into those black spheres, but what we can see is what's happening around them, how those masses are affecting their surroundings. So they're still interacting with things gravitationally, so we can measure things nearby them and see how their movement is affected by the presence of something really massive. We can see how their masses distort light. We saw that in that video that you showed. And we can learn all about their surrounding environments just based on the material that's nearby, right? If there's gas that's surrounding them, then that gas moves very rapidly, it gets very hot, and we're able to detect it through X-rays and other parts of the spectrum. So we can still learn quite a lot about black holes and the effect on their environment just by observing what's near them.
Interesting.
Oh,
Priya, please.
I'd love to jump in.
Go ahead, Kimberly, and then we'll come. No, Kimberly, go ahead.
Jump in first.
So I love the idea that we're looking at this data now, and we're talking about data that is essentially invisible, right? All of this material that we've been talking about, the sonification and that image even from the Event Horizon Telescope, these are in different kinds of light that human eyes can't perceive, that we can't see in X-ray light, we can't see in radio light. So it's really important to consider like all of these things that are happening out there in the universe. So much of it we can't see, and we need different telescopes like the Chandra X-ray Observatory, like the Event Horizon Telescope, in order for us to be able to learn more about them. I like to think of like the Chandra X-ray Observatory as like a black hole hunter. It's found black holes near, far, small, big, even medium-sized ones, kind of like a Goldilocks thing, I guess. There's so much to learn for these little special laboratories that are out there in the universe just waiting to be studied.
And Priya, you were going to say something. You were going to ask.
Yeah, I'm going to say, you know, one, I'm also often asked this question, what does it mean that even light can't escape, right?
Yeah.
So one analogy that we've all seen, right, from Cape Canaveral, you have to boost rockets out so that they escape the gravitational grip of the Earth. So we have to give rocket fuel, boost it up to, 11 kilometers per second, and them to free itself of the Earth's gravity, so it doesn't fall back, right? It sort of escapes. So if you just imagine that's telling you something about the gravity of the Earth. So that's it's doable. The gravity, intense gravity of a black hole is such that escape speed, that rocket speed that you need to give, has to be the speed of light. So that's what we mean when even light cannot escape a black hole.
Interesting.
Yeah, and and how do we, coming back also to this question, as Kimberly and Jehan pointed out, we map these invisible entities indirectly. In the case of a black hole, so it is feeding on gas. So gas is being pulled in, again, by the gravity of the black hole. As the dying gasps of the gas, as it's getting pulled in, it gets heated and it starts to glow. And that's what we are seeing in the X-rays. So we don't actually see the hole. We see the stuff that is en route to...
I do want to ask you about these images. How did the Event Horizon Telescope create the image, this image of the black hole that's at the center of our galaxy? Take a look. We have these are two different images, right? Comparing, help me understand what this is for our audience. Comparing the size of two black holes, the M87 and Sagittarius A. What is significant about this that can be understood by someone, a simpleton like me? Priya?
So, so what we are seeing is we have zoomed in to a region that is right around the event horizon of the black hole, but that sacred boundary that where not even light can escape. We're a little bit outside it here, but we've zoomed right in there to the heart of a black hole, if you will.
Okay.
And these are two black holes. The one that is the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius A star, is 4 million times the mass of the sun. The one in M87 is 6 billion times the mass of the sun, much more massive. And the way the Event Horizon Telescope project managed to zoom right in is they leveraged many radio dishes that are scattered around the Earth to mimic and make the entire size of the Earth behave like one radio dish. And so that's the biggest telescope we can make.
I'm Dr. Jeff Vineker, and today we'll explore the particle nature of matter.
It's crazy to me. I mean, when we talk in these numbers, these figures, it's hard to wrap my mind around it, but that's just me. But Kimberly, that's why you're here. I've read that you kind of talk also about, and by the way, it should be mentioned, the Event Horizon Telescope, for those who don't know, because this is really cool, you can rat out and geek out on this. There were 11 telescopes synchronized around the world, right? Creating sort of a virtual Earth-sized telescope, as we just heard Priya explain, to take these images from far away. So there's so much we know, so much we're learning with the data, so much we don't know, though, Kimberly. Like, what is ultimate, like, are there cosmic recycling centers? Did I understand this right? What might that even mean? I mean, are they recycling up there and we're not recycling?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of recycling, so I think I really like black holes and things like supernova remnants because they are the ultimate cosmic recycling centers, recycling at a much grander scale than humans can ever hope to do. I do think black holes sort of have a bad rap. They've got this sort of negative reputation for being just cosmic vacuum cleaners, you know, things of doom and gloom. And yes, nobody really wants to get too close. I don't want to be spaghettified if I, you know, fall into that gravitational pull. No, thank you.
Right.
I am happy here on Earth and all of that. But we have a lot to be grateful for, I think, as well, to black holes. You know, the stellar explosions that produce many of the black holes that we know about, they're also spewing out other really important elements. When black holes collide, those types of collisions are giving us even more elements, and those types of elements we use here on Earth, right? So there's a lot about this idea of cosmic recycling that I think is very attractive, that it's not just doom and gloom, that it's also creation and potential future life.
Okay, so again, we let that go on for a while. And so there's a lot of ways
I wanted to make, Alex, I wanted to make some comments. First of all of us here who are involved with Pacifica, we know a lot about black holes. They're full of gas. They're full of gas. They've got, you know, what's the other one? They have event horizons. They have all sorts of there's all sorts of analogies to Pacifica that we can make with this. So these are really interesting ideas that are being talked. Secondly, I think it'd be terrific with a Noisy Reality show to really prepare and do some stuff on black holes. Because, you know, what do I know about black holes? I know them from Star Trek. So, like, you know, this is a pretty interesting concept. And then, you know, one could call it political science, which is a name I've always thought should be given to a show. But yes, all of us here, I count that is Dennis, Ken, and others. We're familiar with black holes for goddamn sure, and so is John. That's for sure. But it's a great topic to talk about. And there is on the National Board of Pacifica a physicist who's an astronomer.
Really?
Yes, that's James McFadden. So it would be great to bring him into the picture on this. But anyway, yeah, it's really interesting. And, you know, I don't know jack shit about black holes. So this is sort of
a bit more than jack shit.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, actually, having you know, the physics. Well, Mike knows a lot more than me probably. Yeah, Mike actually studied physics.
I actually can talk about black holes also because that's essentially what my life has become. But the idea of a black hole that's interesting is because, you know, one point of information there, because she was talking about how incredibly massive it is, how much more massive it is than 15 of our suns. But you kind of remember all that mass could be condensed into something the size of a ping pong ball. And if you think of something that incredibly densely massive, where all that mass is so dense, you can imagine the gravitational pull that would exert, since gravity is, you know, in other words, Earth's gravity is formed because of
based
mass.
on mass. Yeah.
So you know, pulling.
But technically, wouldn't that be a table tennis ball as opposed to a ping?
Maybe.
Well, put it this way: it wouldn't have the same density as a ping pong ball or a table tennis ball or any type of ball like that. It would be so incredibly it would be unimaginatively massive. So I think it is a fascinating subject, but the entire subject of cosmology is fascinating, because then you can get into the idea of the red limit, which posits that the universe is curved, but in time, not in space. Right. And I mean, the whole concept of cosmology, along with traditional astronomy, et cetera, is, I mean, we could do 15 noisy realities shows, if not 500.
I mean, I had a friend trying to argue to me, I guess there's some new theory out there that the Big Bang is not how the universe came to, that's wrong. So, you know, there's always...
see, that's the other thing it raises. It raises questions of, frankly, the supreme being. I mean, who's out there swirling around? Is it all chemicals? And, you know, there's another person who's in a black hole area, and that's Mr. Sheridan out there in the Bay Area. And, let me wake you up there when you're eating your, your lo mein or whatever the hell you're eating. I wonder what you think, John, about the black hole issue.
I'm fascinated by it, but I'm like you. I don't know very much about it other than the incredible densities of it and the incredible gravity of it. And for a long time, I remember they were saying that you couldn't create an image of one because it absorbed so much that you couldn't. What are you seeing? You're seeing the absence or something. You're seeing, I don't know, what's left over, but not the thing itself. I always thought that was really a fascinating concept. Being a visual artist, I'm always very interested in, like, what?
Oh, right, yeah.
You can't see something. You can't see something. Well, okay. I mean, I can kind of wrap my mind around a little about that, but the idea that there's this massive thing out there, or things that are basically only able to be indirectly experienced or perceived, rather. And I don't know. I just think stuff like that to an artist is really interesting. It's kind of impossible to really conceptualize.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenny, what do you think about
Kenny,
Kenny, because you've been quiet. I mean, we want to hear your wisdom about this stuff, man.
Well, yeah, I can't reveal that. but I will. I just looked up something. There's a very interesting phenomena. One of my favorite science fiction writers was Larry Niven, and he wrote a great story about well, it was a story, but the key element was a micro black hole. Micro black holes, also called quantum mechanical black holes or mini black holes, are hypothetical black holes for which quantum mechanics effects play an important role. In other words, you could have, instead of having a black hole, which is the condensation of a star like the sun, and you take the sun and squeeze it down to a size of a pea, so you got all that mass in a small space, and then you got that intense gravity that doesn't have an escape velocity that's greater than the speed of light, which is a very good point that lady made. It's a good way to understand it. It's not, forget about that, light can't come out. You have to go faster than the speed of light to get out, because that's the escape velocity. Anyhow, you could have a condensation of mass that gave you a small black hole on a microscopic level, that didn't have to start from a sun. So it's mostly theoretical. And there was something that I discovered, and I'm not sure if it was I who discovered this or my son, but I'll put it out to you folks. Here's the story. If there's a black hole or something like that, and light beams are coming, light travels all through the universe, comes from everywhere, goes everywhere. So, if I light a flashlight, put it up to the sky, it's going to go 40 billion years. Nothing's going to stop it unless it hits an object and bounces back. But there's lots of light in the universe, wherever you are. So here's a black hole, and a photon is coming towards the black hole. Now, one or two things is going to happen. It's going to get pulled in, or it's going to go past. affected by the gravity, but it's going to go around it, okay? So it goes around it or it gets pulled in. Except there's another group that are just going to go into orbit. Photons that'll go into orbit around the black hole. Okay? So therefore, at any, over a short period of time, the black hole will have a halo around it.
Right.
Photons that don't go in and don't go out. And actually, I guess the same thing could be said about any star or planet or anything else. But specifically on a black hole, because that's gonna that point of differentiation where that halo is going to be,
Right, yeah,
is going to be in close proximity.
You saw that in the image they had of the two black holes merging, because they're watching it. There was an area between them before they merged where things are swirling even there, and then eventually they contact, and they just become one bigger black hole.
Well, the same thing going to happen at the prom, the high school dance. There's a woman who's so attractive, and then the guys are going to come over, and some can, have enough courage to walk up and ask her for a dance. Other people just going to shy away. But certain people are just going to go around in a circle, around and around. Should I ask her to dance? Should I not ask her to dance?
Right.
So that's the application, taking the black hole and moving it up. Oh, look who just showed up. There's Darryl. Hi, Darryl.
Yeah. Well,
I know he's been here, but he's been hiding in the dark. So this is
actually, Alex?
Yeah. Go on, Mike.
Yeah, it's Mike. I'm going to have to get off. Should I say leave the show? Get off is a whole other thing. But I did want to, I was going to put it on at the end of the show, but I wouldn't be able to. Something that I discovered, even though I thought I knew all of them, I found there's a verse. I know this is totally off the subject, but going back to the original topic, is a verse of God Save the Queen, or I should say now God Save the King, that is very rarely sung or used. And I think it's interesting, and I don't know why it isn't sung, but I mean, I can think of superficial or ridiculous reasons, and it goes like this. I'm also going to do this so you can all get a demonstration of why I do straight dramatic plays and not musical theater. It goes, not in this land alone, but be God's mercies known from shore to shore. Lord, make the nation see that men should brothers be and form one family, no worldwide or. Now that's a really benevolent. Yeah, I could see it could be considered sexist. That's a really benevolent, anti-colonial, if you want to put it that way, kind of verse.
Yeah.
It's one of the 5 verses of God Save the King now.
Right.
And I don't know why it's never used. Because
maybe to make it more concise.
Well, no, I mean there are times when they sing 2 or 3 verses,
right?
But they rarely sing that one.
Yeah, because it's definitely not like the racist verses in our national anthem that always get left.
Right,
out.
exactly,
and probably should be. Yeah, unless you want to.
So with and also there was one quote about the Queen where I thought was relevant to our times that. When something like the Queen was guided us with a beacon of humane and humanitarian behavior in a storm of incivility.
Oh.
I thought that was an interesting quote.
What does Queen Elizabeth have with fucking black holes, man? Jesus Christ. I mean, come on, man. I mean, I know you want to get that in there because you're a monarchist, but
No, I wanted to get that in there because I have to go leave the show.
Okay.
So,
you got your
totally irrelevant.
Queen Elizabeth. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, we had quite a bit on her earlier.
So, anyway, by the way, that quote was said by me, so it was a bit of self-promotion also. So anyway,
We'll see you next week.
It never happened.
What do you mean? I just said it. Of course it happened.
No, it didn't.
No.
Huh?
Come on, Mike. Give me a break. We're the crown jewels, right? They weren't in Philip's pants.
No. I was talking about that quote was about her behavior.
Yes. What was her behavior while she had starving? What do you call it?
Well, Darryl.
Underlings.
Subjects.
Darryl. She was
there you go.
She was a basically powerless.
Would you want her to be your mother?
Yeah. And my mother wasn't much different from her, except she didn't go traveling all over the time.
From what you've said about your mom,
then
I think
again,
your mom was much more affectionate than things I've heard.
No. I saw Elizabeth up close a couple of times. I wasn't formally introduced to her, but I saw how she behaved, and it's not how you see in the media, etc. But you got to remember, you're talking about somebody who is predominantly powerless. But I'll let you continue that discussion because I really have to go.
All right, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Cheers.
I honor my relatives who were at Valley Forge, who fought to throw those bastards out of the country. Okay.
And I honor those people who fought Nazism 2.25 years before the United States decided to do it.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
I honor those people who keep their
folks.
word.
All right.
Adieu.
Adieu.
Okay. Well, on that, I don't.
Prosper.
The other piece I have is also a long one, so I think we can call it a night unless you have something, Ken, you wanted to.
Oh no.
Sure, you wanted to play.
No.
Alex, should I just throw something in about the physics thing?
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so currently we think, and we're taught we're in real time, correct?
Right.
Nah.
Everything is in the past.
Yeah.
Everything is in the past. And vibration is the cure for everything. Change the vibration, you change everything. That's what I got out of looking at the James Webb and the black hole thing. Right?
Yeah.
And people fail to understand that. They make up this whole thing about how they're taught and what they're understanding. And what they're understanding is totally incorrect. However, if everybody agrees it's incorrect, it's correct, then it doesn't matter what you think or what the facts are. So then we get to January 6th. I'll stop.
All right. That's another little stretcheroonie. But I think it'd be really interesting, Alex. Those women look like they just love to talk about black holes.
Yeah. Oh, no.
They really are
They're obviously
enthusiastic.
good at talking about
Let's not get disgusting.
Well, no. I just said that it's a really interesting topic, and it's one that has all sorts of interesting sidebars to it. I mean, my God, cosmology, and what is actually going on in the universe. I mean, it's just look at that. Remember how popular Carl Sagan was,
right?
These kind of topics. And it always fascinates. I think this issue that is presented by them, and someone just raised the James Webb telescope stuff. That is amazing stuff, And so yes, I do. I don't pretend to know this subject well, but I sure as hell would like to get people who know the subject well to talk about it and sort of make it plain to the layperson. That I think would be a worthwhile project. Not now, but certainly interesting.
Yeah.
I wish they point the telescope this way so we can find out what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, right. Right.
Well, if anybody's pointing it there,
Well, I like that inaudible sound part. That also resonated me with Pacifica. Like they had to magnify it because it's a B flat. I love it.
Right.
Anyway. All right, Alex.
Well. Remember, was it Ross Perot kind of used black hole imagery? Remember the NAFTA that it was going to be a giant sucking zone for U.S. jobs, which unfortunately kind of turned out to be true. But let's bring this to a close.
I mean, before we go, I just want to say, John, it's good to see you.
Nice to see
Please
you.
come
John.
on to some more meetings.
Yeah.
John, it says, yeah, it's
You
great.
should come by more often. Yeah.
Dennis,
I will try.
Yes.
I will try like hell. Normally, I'm having dinner on a Wednesday evening, and it makes
Right.
it just hard to be in two places at once.
So
My
what,
girlfriend, extremely sick. So
You got
I'm not having
Jim's. You got Jim's or Ken's email that we were doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark, and it's also great to have Dennis here and Mark. Thank you,
Right.
Mark, for taking time to join us tonight.
Thanks. I appreciate the invite. Send me in the next time if you can.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And Patrick, who didn't say anything, it's great to see you. I was trying to figure out who Patrick Smith was because I've seen you around a couple of times. But anyway, thanks for joining us. And as always, it's great to have Ken, our great host in California, and our inspiration, Mr. Aaron.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Well,
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
we've
Actually, that's true. Yes.
Got a very full deck today. 10 people actually.
Okay.
So yes, let me thank everybody because it's actually going to be a long list tonight.
Pull the chain, flush the toilet.
So yeah, let me thank Jim Dingeman, Dennis Goldstein, Mark Whitman, Frank Radford, Ken Aaron, Patrick Smith, even though he didn't say anything, John Sheridan, Darryl McPherson, and Michael Jankowitz. So we will see you guys next week. Thanks. This has been Going Viral. Oh, you can catch us at the GV Combine page within YouTube to listen to this in the near future and to our older episodes, which are actually a considerable number at this point.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, Mark. Yeah, well, if you want to join us, it's usually every Wednesdays the way we've been going. So if you want to join us same time next week, we'll probably be there.